Just a moment ago, we sang some of the more famous words in Jewish tradition. Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba v'tomchea meushar. She, that is the Torah, is a tree of life to those who hold on to her, and whoever who upholds her is happy. Derachea darchei noam v'chol nativotea shalom. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all of her paths are peace. The words come from Mishlei, from the book of Proverbs, but you might be interested to know that in Proverbs, the two lines appear in the reverse order. The rabbis flipped the biblical verses in order to conclude with, and therefore emphasize, peace, shalom. Now, this is a common move in our liturgy. We conclude the Amidah with Sim Shalom or Shalom Rav. The final blessing of our central 3 times a day prayer is about peace. If that's not enough, there's an additional paragraph read quietly, which ends, Oseh Shalom Bimromav. May the one who makes peace in the heavens. In this week's parasha, we have Birkat Kohanim, the priestly threefold blessing, the benediction, with which the Kohanim bless the entire nation of Israel. The last line of which is, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God lift up God's face to you and grant you shalom, give you peace. So today I want to talk about shalom, peace, but perhaps not in the way that you might think. I'm not here today to talk about Iran or Lebanon or Israel's multi-front conflicts. Of course, these things are on our minds. I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, think frequently about the U.S. and Israel, whose military entanglements, destinies, and dispositions are consequential to our American Jewish identity. And our tradition has much to say about the pursuit of peace geopolitically and otherwise. I've spoken about these things from this bima before. What I want to explore today, though, is perhaps a bit more surprising, that for the rabbis, peace in the world, as it were, is acutely related to peace in the home. That's not a dodge. The latter may, in fact, be a prescription for addressing the former. In fact, these macro and micro considerations sometimes appear in the same breath. For example, the Rambam, Moses Maimonides, the 12th century philosopher, physician, and halachist, concludes his Hilchot Megillah v'Chanukah with a statement about peace. Again, not a coincidence that he concludes both this section and an entire book of the Mishnah Torah, Sefer Zmanim, with the notion of peace. That's the Jewish way. He writes, Gadol HaShalom, Shekol HaTorah Nitna La'asot Shalom Ba'olam. Peace is great, for the entire Torah was given to bring about peace within the world. What's his proof text? Why, it's our verse from Mishlei, from the end of the Torah service. Derachea darchei noam v'chol nativotea shalom. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all of her paths are peace. But here's where it gets interesting. The context is that Maimonides is doing a values clarification exercise for those who have limited resources. What if you have to choose between lighting Shabbat candles or lighting the Chanukiah, the Hanukkah menorah? Or if you have to choose between Shabbat candles and Kiddush? In both cases, says the Rambam, you spend your money on Shabbat candles. Why? Mishum shalom beito Sheharei Hashem nimchak la'asot shalom ben ish li'ishto. Because Shabbat candles represent shlom bayit, peace in the home. This value, explains the Rambam, is so important that God's very name is blotted out in order to establish peace in the home between husbands and wives. So peace in the world becomes dependent on peace in the home. But God's name blotted out? Why would such a thing be necessary? What on earth is the Rambam referring to? In fact, he's talking about Parashat Naso. He's talking about this week's Torah portion. Not the priestly benediction, not the Nazir that Aviva discussed so beautifully, but the Sota ritual, the ritual through which ostensibly adulterous wives are identified and punished, but more likely exonerated. More likely because the likelihood of a jealous husband's false accusation is almost certainly more frequent than the woman's guilt, but also because the potion through which she is punished is not deadly. It's dirt, water, ink. The question for us, the radical observation from Maimonides and other sources, is that the content written in ink is not so benign as the ink itself. Naso describes the end result of the ritual. The priest shall put these curses down in writing and rub them off into the waters of bitterness. But what does the priest actually write? Yitain Adonai otach la'ala v'lishvu'a b'toch amech. May the Lord make a curse and an imprecation upon your people. B'teit Adonai et yirechech nofelet ve'et bitnech tzava. As the Lord causes your thigh to sag and your belly to distend. 2 times the word Yud-He Vav-He, God's holy, proper name, is written down on parchment. It is this word, along with the entire incantation, which is rubbed off, blotted out into the Mei Amarim, into the bitter waters. This is what the Rambam means when he says God's very name is erased in order to establish peace in the home between husbands and wives. Still, we might wonder about the stakes. What's so bad about erasing God's name? Raise your hand if you've heard the term Geniza. Okay, a number of you have. Geniza is a storehouse, right? A hidden place, a repository for sacred texts which are no longer in use. But we probably know the term because it is the appropriate disposal mechanism for what we call shemot. That is paper or parchment on which God's holy name is written. What may we not do with these items like sidurim, unusable scrolls from mezuzot, old tefillin? Throw them away, destroy them. Anything with God's name must be buried, treated with utmost respect as we would a human being. In fact, this prohibition against destroying God's name comes paradoxically from the positive commandment to destroy definitively and clearly false gods, that is, idols. Not this week, but last Shabbat in Parashat Re'eh, which we read on Shavuot, the book of Deuteronomy makes clear that idol worship is one of those things in Judaism which is beyond the pale. Tear down their altars, we read. Smash their pillars, put their sacred posts to the fire, and cut down the images of their gods, that is, the false gods, obliterating their name from that site. Lo ta'asun ken ladonai Elohechem. Do not worship the Lord your God in a like manner. Now, the next verse is crucial for the way our sages understand how we must treat God's name. Here it is. But look only to the site that the eternal your God will choose amidst your tribes as God's habitation to establish the divine name there. Rabbi Avram Reisner, a local rabbi here in Baltimore and also one of the leaders of the conservative movement's law committee, explains in his tshuvah, his responsum on Shemot, on what we are to do with things that have God's name written on them. And he explains the connection in this way. Just as one must destroy idolatrous temples, one must refrain from destroying God's temple, just as one must obliterate the name of idolatrous gods, so must one refrain from obliterating God's name. Did you catch it? It's a double move. The what, do destroy their names, but don't destroy God's, and the where, uproot worship in the wrong places in favor of a singular right one. The prohibition against destroying Shemot is quite strict. The Talmud reads the following. The sages taught, if one wrote Aleph Lamed from Elohim, or Yud-He from Yud-He Vav-He, they may not be erased. And Rabbi Ishmael in the Midrash says, if one erases one letter of the name, he is in transgression of a negative commandment. So if this is the case, that destroying even one letter of God's name is strictly prohibited, how is it possible that the priest should be writing the divine name twice on parchment for the sota ordeal, only to scrape the words off and obliterate them in water? Or more specifically, what's the relationship between reestablishing trust between a married couple and what we call shalom bayit, peace in the home? I want to suggest that the two pieces, the what and the where, are interrelated. Think about the final verse I mentioned from Devarim, from Deuteronomy. But look only to the site that the eternal your God will choose. The last book of Torah is largely concerned with redirecting all ritual practice to the future temple in Jerusalem. It's not just that foreign deities are forbidden, it's that decentralized worship is forbidden. There is one house, God's house, in one place with one priestly class who are responsible for ritual. The radical claim from the Rambam, which is based on the same radical claim in the Gemara, is not only that each marriage is worthy of contravening a negative commandment, but that each Jewish home is like the Holy of Holies. How is it that the Rambam can so easily conflate presumably small concerns like marital reconciliation with global, even cosmic concerns like world peace? Because for our tradition, they are one and the same. It is quite simply a matter of scale. To exist in this world, to construct systems of accountability, families, communities, societies, is to scaffold securely one layer on top of the next. When we harm those most dear to us, when we sow mistrust among those we love and with whom we live, we participate in the weakening of the larger infrastructure of collective human existence. On the other hand, when we reduce or repair harm, when we give attention to those within our most intimate spaces, when we invest time and attention for those with whom we share the bulk of our lives, we shore up our part of that same infrastructure. To create shalom bayit, peace in the home between partners, within our nuclear and our extended families, with guests at our table, or for that matter, when we strive for the same within our shared spaces, our synagogues, for example. All these efforts are not an abrogation of our commitment to world peace, they are a partial fulfillment of that mission. The temple in Jerusalem, it's been gone for a very long time. There is no longer a sota ritual, and that's a good thing. Even if permissible, it is no longer necessary to destroy God's name for the sake of shalom bayit. But we have countless opportunities to uplift and sanctify God's name. Our sages consider our synagogues and our homes to be mikdashei me'at, small but powerful sanctuaries. When we meet the moment in these spaces with people who inhabit them with us, that is avodat kodesh, that is holy work. Indeed, it is avodah shebalev, labor of the heart, a form of prayer. And that form of prayer, if you will, ascends now from potentially millions of Jewish spaces around the world, like the reach nichoach, the sweet scent from those sacrifices of old. Jewish prayer from the Siddur, as we know, may explore any number of topics and concerns, but we end again and again and again. Where? With shalom, with peace. So this week, let's think about whether we are as consistent in this goal as is our liturgy. And if not, what might we do to follow the darchei noam, the nitivot shalom, these pathways toward greater peace in our homes, and through them, hopefully, the world beyond. Shabbat shalom.